Good to have you with us here on the Friday edition of the South African Morning. I'm Gareth Edwards. We're all getting ready to hear what the Finance Minister has in store for us at Budget 2022. That's coming up next week. The alcohol industry is pleading with Treasury not to increase sin taxes above inflation. The industry is still recovering, of course, from 2 years of lockdown restrictions, and we saw when alcohol itself was banned, and it came back, then it was banned again. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will deliver his maiden budget speech next week. Kurt Moore from the South African Liquor Brand Owners Association joining us this morning to get his thoughts. Kurt, morning to you. The problem, I imagine, with sin taxes is I almost get the feeling it doesn't matter how much they tax alcohol, people will still buy it. It's an easy commodity to tax very highly.
Good morning, Gareth. Yeah, your assessment is correct. In fact, if we look back, since 2000, the excise rates for alcohol has quadrupled. But the World Bank data certainly suggests that it hasn't impacted on the way South Africans drink, so we haven't reduced our consumption. So the idea that increasing taxes helps to reduce helps to reduce consumption of alcohol is, in our view, unfounded. What it does tend to do, if we increase excise excessively, it tends to push the sale of alcohol to the illicit trade, and that seems to be a growing problem as far as we're concerned.
And that is the issue, because we saw this during the various lockdowns and the bans of alcohol. South Africans are going to find it any which way that they can. So if I understand correctly, we're not going to try and ask government as a country not to increase the sin taxes. They're going to, but you're asking to keep it within relation to inflation. Have I got that right?
Absolutely. We're calling for moderation in terms of the increase, so linked to inflation. In fact, we don't believe it should go higher than inflation. President Ramaphosa in his State of the Nation address spoke about creating an environment in which businesses can invest. And part of the problem within the alcohol sector is that we do not have policy certainty. Government has set itself a policy for excise. We are currently operating within or just outside of that policy. If increases are in excess of the current inflation rate, then we're probably going to be operating as we are right now outside of that policy framework, which makes it very difficult for investments in our industry.
I suppose the knock-on effect of another increase, and there probably is going to be another sin tax increase to some degree or another, is do we ever see the amount of alcohol, the cost of alcohol itself going up before we get to the tax and excise duties? Are we seeing alcohol itself getting more expensive?
Yeah, obviously, I think when these increases come through, we do have a very competitive market. So some producers and businesses will try to absorb some of those costs so that they can at least retain their market share. So it does put pressure on the entire value chain. And I think the SMMEs are the ones who struggle because they need to compete with these illicit traders.
Just how damaging has the last 2 years been, Kurt, for the liquor brand owners? Give me a sense of the damage that we're talking about here.
Well, the impact of the pandemic has been huge. But I think if you look at it as you mentioned earlier, from a perspective of illicit trade, we did an assessment in 2017 and again in 2021, and illicit trade had grown by over 20% during that period, which also resulted in a significant loss for the fiscus. In 2017, the loss to the fiscus was 6.4 billion rand. Last year, when we did that assessment, it was 11.3 billion rand. So that's what the fiscus loses as a result of illicit trade. The illicit trade market itself is around about 12% by volume of the overall alcohol industry, and owns a significant chunk of about 20.5 billion rand. That's money that doesn't go back into the fiscus. It doesn't contribute to the growth of our economy and doesn't help to create the jobs which we so desperately need.
Just before I start saying goodbye to you this morning, Kurt, you talked about the illicit trade, how that jumped during the lockdown and the various bans of alcohol. Now that alcohol has opened up freely again, you can buy it in restaurants, you can sit down, pubs, restaurants, liquor stores open, normal trading hours. Are we seeing a reduction in illicit trade, or is that still as high, A? And B, I imagine if it's still very high, that's eating into your bottom line.
Absolutely. We haven't done an assessment since the lockdown has been lifted, or since the restrictions have been lifted. But, even the Commissioner of SARS admitted that these channels are now known to consumers who may have not previously accessed the illicit trade channels. So they might well continue, even though the bans have been lifted, they may well continue accessing those illegal sources going forward, because they, as consumers, they now are aware of these avenues to purchase alcohol illegally.
Yeah. I'm going to leave this as my last question to you, Kurt, this morning. So we know the Finance Minister watches the show every single day. He's taking notes ahead of budget speech. What does Kurt Moore and the South African Liquor Brand Owners Association want the Finance Minister to take into consideration before the speech next week?
We're calling on the Finance Minister not to lift the excise rates by more than inflation. We think that this industry, in order for it to grow and to invest and to create jobs, needs some policy certainty. Government has a policy, and we are calling on the minister to act within the policy confines that government has set for itself.
Well, there you have it, Finance Minister Godongwana. You've now heard from the South African Liquor Brand Owners Association and Kurt Moore. Kurt, thank you very much for your time this morning. And as I was saying, it's got to do with the sin taxes, and it's an easy one to. It's like cigarettes. People are still going to buy.
Absolutely.
It's not a deterrent. Government just makes more money from it because people are still going to do it. Appreciate Kurt's time this morning.